For those of you that may not be familiar with the name, Baker Hughes is an energy technology company and one of the biggest players in that space. Traditionally, they came from the oilfield services sector, but then really in the last 3 years, they've moved through full stream cycle of energy. It's an organization that's about 60,000 people strong, and it's a Fortune 200 company headquartered here in Houston in the US. So just a little bit of background after giving myself some introduction, and I'll pass it over to Mike.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Mike Chapman. I think I pipped Tim by a year or two with 26 years in RPO and MSP. So I was a founding director of Alexander Man Solutions back in '96. Grew that business in Europe till 2001, then went to Asia and started Alexander Man Solutions there in Asia. Back in 2005, carried on building the delivery centers in Krakow and the Philippines, and managing any accounts which were in trouble. So I was a bit of a troubleshooter. And then left there in '08 when we did a VC turn. I thought I'd left the industry for good. Silly me. I got a call. Rosalind Blair, the CEO at AMS, dragged me back to meet another CEO. And I led a partnership between AMS and NES Fircroft to drive RPO in particular into the oil and gas industry. Because the penetration was very poor. No one had really done any global work with the oil and gas industry, where there's been national oil companies, international oil companies, service companies. Because it's a challenging world. You're in that first meeting, they say, tell me about your capability in Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Angola. And a lot of the RPOs, I'm sort of struggling with that. But the NES Fircroft side had the answer to a lot of those questions, the ability to get visas and mobilize people. So actually the two companies together made a decent value proposition to that market. So I led that partnership from being on the NES side this time. And I left there in 16, but stayed consulting back to them. The client we're talking about today was actually one of the first ones we won in that back in 09, 10, something like that we started. And this all came from a good old-fashioned cold call. I said, I'm going to phone the top 50 oil and gas companies and see what they want to do with their RPO. And funnily enough, they said, we've got a problem in Iraq. And I said, I can solve that. And off we went. And we've grown this from that every day. We've managed to pretty much stop any competitive tender situations, and we'll talk about how we did that. So, yeah, we don't want to talk about selling today. We're going to talk about how that journey's been over the last 13 years, and it really made us scratch our heads and think, what have we been doing? Why have we managed to survive and grow for 12 or 13 years? And try and bottle that and put that into 20 or 30 minutes is what we're going to try and do for you now. So that's me.
So before we go into the secrets and learnings of our journey, we're going to take you on that journey in under 2 minutes. Let's hope this works. highlight. That was 2 minutes and 13 seconds, but there we go.
And that had to be a lot less painful than us talking you through it, but you can see how it's been incremental year on year, offering new solutions on our proven track record. And we'll go through that in a little bit more detail. So, must evolve to survive, and we're certainly offering very different services today than we were 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. Move me on one. Thanks. Credit to Everest Group. A lot of you will have seen this in their report from last year, all about RPO 1.0, 2.0. I was sort of around here. I remember talking to Everest when they did their first reports back in sort of 2000 time. And we move on, and this has been a pretty good indication of actually how the accounts grow. Pretty transactional to start with, and we were hearing from Ben how you got to move through to the value add. That certainly started to happen, and I guess the thing which really changed it for us was this one, competitive advantage. The time you move from being a processor, operator and an outsourcer, and you move into competitive advantage giver to them, that's when the business really sits up and takes notice, and then you know you're getting really sticky, what I call sticky. You're hard to get rid of because you've got fans across the business, and we want to sort of use examples here. So within the Middle East, it's a challenging market, and a lot of the national oil companies give out the contracts to the service companies, and they give them to the service companies who meet certain quotas of nationalization. So they're using Saudis in Saudi or Iraqis in Iraq. And we help Baker Hughes have the highest nationalization rates amongst all the service companies. They won many more contracts because of our input, and we were called out at board level because our campaigns had far outstripped the competitors and got them into a competitive winning situation. So we really turned there and gave them competitive advantage. We've got a number of examples like that, where it wasn't we working with TA and HR, it was actually recognizing the business was trying to sell something, and we talked to them about what's holding you back on a people side. So we've been evolving through. Sometimes you can only go as fast as the client will let you go. We'd have loved to have done a load more tech, we'd have loved to have used many more advanced techniques, but they were merging with GE, splitting from GE. They say, slow down, we can't do that. We're going to put Workday in. Oh, God, no. You know. Sorry, nobody from Workday here, is it? Then they're going to put Phenom people in. Oh, great. All right, let's make that work with Workday. So all that sort of stuff, we're probably not as far as advanced as we should be. But the stuff which makes us really sticky, we are. So we didn't see tech as a differentiator for us in this. I've covered that probably.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll let you move on, Shalena.
No problem. Okay, so basically when we looked at our evolutionary journey, we found 4 main principles that resulted in our success, and these are those 4 main principles that are the secret sauce of our journey. So we'll start off with number 1, what's most important to us, and that's our people. So we started in Asia Pacific with a team of 11, and right from the very beginning, we understood the importance of diversity and affinity. And now all these many years later, we've held true to that, and even though we're 200 people strong, it still feels like a family, a very loud, noisy, dispersed family, but it definitely feels like it. And for the most part, people stick around, I think you all would have seen firsthand just how high the turnover in RPO is. If you get somebody around for a couple of years, that's great, but for the most part, our people stick with us. And I think what's an even bigger testament to the connection that they feel with us is that when they do leave, very often they come back. And we can see about 20% of our team, over 200 people, are made up of rehires. And those that come back, they stick around for a really good time. And that's something that we're really proud of. So how do we achieve this people-centric approach? So first and foremost is we definitely have a strong connection to the regions in which we operate. Everyone, ourselves included, our stakeholders included, do not like being dictated to. They don't like being told what to do, and they certainly don't like it when they don't get a voice at the table and they don't get the input into those decisions that get made in HQ in Houston by people who maybe have never traveled outside of North America, telling the guys in Iraq, in China, in Saudi, in Romania what to do. It doesn't work. They may comply, but it's malicious compliance. There's no spirit in the compliance, and they'll get away with whatever they think they can get away with. So when you have teams that are local to the region, local to the stakeholders they operate with, what happens is that there's that connection, that allegiance, and all right, this is what we got to do. How can we make the best of this situation and ensure that whatever comes globally does get executed in a way that makes sense locally. But that cycle continues. Our teams also then in turn feed back up to us to say, hey, that's not going to work for my region, or that's not going to work for my group of stakeholders, or that's not going to work for my candidate markets. We need to make sure that that feedback is continuous. And what it creates is this very, very healthy cycle of diversity in perspective and diversity in thought, which ultimately is why diversity is really, really important, and for our clients as well, they feel that they're being protected, that they get a seat at the table, that they feel that their thoughts are being represented back to the decision makers in HQ and they couldn't do it themselves. What we do find obviously is that when you have a team that has dispersed and as diverse as us, you do need to proactively safeguard your own organizational culture. Because if, I've got my recruiters sitting on their own in Singapore and they don't see anyone from their team for a while, they're surrounded by Baker people, how do I make sure that they still feel like they're part of my team, that they're still embedded into the NES Fircroft culture and don't get eaten up by the client culture, which may have negatives as well as positives. So making sure that we're proactive about safeguarding that culture is really important as well, and making sure that you're still leveraging efficiencies and commercial decisions in where you place your people, and investing in locations where it makes the most sense to drive some of that local representation. Another thing within our account that is super, super important, and I think a really big part of our success, is agility and autonomy. So within NES Fircroft, the Baker account is operated almost as its own business segment. We report directly to the board. We operate independent of the regions in which we operate. So my recruiters in Asia don't really have that much to do with the NES Fircroft Asia Pacific business. My recruiters in the Middle East, they report directly to the accounts Middle East op director. She reports to me, I report to the COO. It takes us, on average, less than 24 hours from the time we identify we need a recruiter in Thailand, I got a great CV, offers in front of the candidate in less than 24 hours. We don't get bogged down in complex approval matrix, having to justify to various level of stakeholders to get decisions. And this flows down to every single person in our account. The ops directors in region have the same autonomy, but even so do the recruiters. We expect the recruiters to operate their own portfolios like their own business. And how do we drive this autonomy? Through commissions. So our recruiters on the account get commissions, much like agency recruiters. And this is quite rare in the RPO space. But what we found is that by doing this, it really drives that ownership. They know that how much they put in is how much they're going to get out. And we have penalties for not meeting SLAs. SLAs are directly driven by the contract. They have no sales targets or any of that sort of stuff that is not relevant to the drivers that we want to see. But what we've seen is this has been the most effective way to drive productivity, to drive compliance with the SLAs, to drive stakeholder engagement, because the recruiters truly know that this is their baby. They're going to want to make it work. They come to us and go, I can't fill this position, but I've done some research. This is going to work for my area, because they're being driven by those bonuses at the end of the day. And we make sure, obviously, that has the drivers change, that gets reflected in how we remunerate our teams as well. But obviously, we don't give everybody unlimited reign. You do need to have certain monitoring mechanisms to make sure that if the ship starts to sway a little bit off course, you bring them back in. As I said, our teams are very regionalized, and sometimes what those regions want to do may not necessarily align with what the global objectives or goals are. In the Middle East, our team with the local stakeholders had come up with this solution for contingent labor that was what the local stakeholders wanted. It was a very regionalized, very localized solution that wasn't necessarily in line with what HQ wanted. Local stakeholders were happy, but then guess what happened? So it's a changing of the guards. The leadership came in, they're like, what is this? This is not what we signed up for. This is not in line with what the company wants to do. So in those cases, you got to come in and do a little bit of damage control and veer everybody back onto course. So it works for the most part, but you can't just let them run loose. We still have a global objectives and a framework to work within. And something that we're very, very proud of within our own team is that we walk the talk of progression. Every single one of our senior leaders came through the ranks. I myself started as a senior recruiter on the account 12, 13 years ago and have come through the ranks that way. So has every single one of our op directors. And for new people coming into our team, that's a really powerful thing to see that, they can see, oh, this person was a recruiter, they've moved to here, they're now relocating to another location. It's one thing to hear, oh yeah, I hear there's career opportunities, I hear there's mobility opportunities, but to not actually see it doesn't bring it to life. So when they can see other examples of how we have lived and breathed this investing in our people, it becomes real for them. And one thing that we also need to make sure of is that it's a transparent, structured process, that it's not just something that's done, behind closed doors, or there seems to be a way, but I don't know what that is. It's something that we're very clear about right from a person's second week. We actually take them through what our development framework is, what's expected of them if they want to progress and move into other areas within the team. We have opportunities for them to cross streams. If they're currently in RPO, but they may actually have interest in MSP down the track, how do they explore that? And making sure that they know what's expected of them is key to bringing it all to life, the progression that they can see. But a big part of servant leadership is recognizing that everybody has their own path. Not everyone wants to progress upward. Not everyone wants to travel the world like me. So, some people are very happy doing what they're doing. Our top performer in Asia Pacific is a senior recruiter out in KL who's been a senior recruiter for 10 years. And he's phenomenal. He loves what he does and he wants to keep doing it. And part of what we need to do as his leaders, continue to nurture and support that so that he can go after what his goals and aspirations are, even though his journey may not look the same like everybody else's. And that's a big part of what we're really proud of. We're not asking you to fit our mold. We'll support you to be successful in your own individual journey.
As you can probably tell, Shalena's passionate about the people, and that's been so key. People are the success of this, and it gives you this continuity when we have such retention with our people, and that continuity then flows down to that advantage to the client. If they're talking to people who've been around 3 and 4 years, know their procedures and policies and the company's alignment better than their own HR do quite often because they're rotating so often, we've got a massive head start in every conversation. And I love the example Shalena gave me the other day. She was working with a senior person when she was in Saudi Arabia, in Dubai. That senior individual left, came back, rehired by Baker 4 or 5 years later into Houston, just see if Shalena's still around because I need to do some hiring. Yeah, Shalena's still around. She's now in Houston. This is how you do it now. This is your recruiter. Oh, this is fantastic. Straight back into the process. Just that continuity of people gives us that advantage. So when we were looking at why had we been so sticky, that continuity gives you relationships. Relationships makes you sticky. When something goes wrong, you've got the relationships because of that continuity. We've done some really imaginative retention things. Retention bonuses obviously are easy. We've helped people get deposits for houses and apartments wherever they live. Certain paths we'll put them on to get them into home ownership. They don't leave you when you've done that sort of thing. The loyalty just flows through the account. Shalena's been with me 12 years, and all the other directors are 10. It is a family. We're lucky like that. Many of the RPOs rotate their people every couple of years. The senior people especially get rotated through accounts, which is great, and there's good value to that. And we try and tap into all of that. We can go to AMS and talk to all their client directors. But every time we get a new client director from the AMS side, we spend 6 months teaching them the account. They don't add that much value. They bring a couple of ideas. So there's a downside to that too. And we've certainly, played on the continuity piece and the retention of our people. Where am I going now, Shalena?
Clients. So next part of what we hold dear is our client. Oh, sorry, I'm going back too far now.
The Mac is...
There we go.
The Mac behaves differently to this Prezi software.
So the next principle is really our client. We are unique in that we are a single account-centric team. Baker are the be-all and end-all of our existence virtually. So what this means is that we put them at the very center of our operations, but also our philosophy. We build our models around them, we build our solutions around them, and we flex and ebb with their needs because they're dynamic, and we need to make sure that we respond to that. But that's been that's been a really big part of our story and our success, is that dedication to that one client. And I think it's quite unique to how we run our business compared to the traditional RPO model. Over to you, Mike.
So that client centricity is we just get up every morning thinking, if we worked for Baker, what would we do better? And we just trust in that process that will bring us commercial return and longevity. And we drill that down through the team. And that comes through in that integrity. So we really focus in the conversations we have with people on integrity and doing the right thing by the client at every single opportunity. And we had an example I'll try and use for this one as well. We had a slight change in process from the client. Every external hire, whether it be temp to perm or not, had to be advertised externally and an external search conducted. That was a change in their policy at HR level. We implemented that as required. We didn't really look at the contract, but within the contract, we could charge our full fee if we've done an external search. But 95% of the time, the manager knew who they were going to take a temp to perm. They didn't even look at any of the CVs we might send them. They just hired, and they could have been stuck with a full fee. So it was a year, 18 months, and the senior contract manager said, we'd really like to do away with this clause. Doesn't seem like it's very good value. And we said, no, that's pretty bad. Let's just go and have a look how much that's cost you, and we might work something out for you. Went back to the directors in each region, and they went back to the team managers, and we said, how much does this cost them? Nothing. What do you mean, nothing? We didn't charge it. It didn't feel right. Wasn't fair. Didn't want to tell the manager I've charged them for that. That's when we've got it right. When at a commission level, someone's made the decision to do the right thing and say, no, I'm not going to charge them whatever $1,000 for just sending a CV I know he didn't open. So you've got integrity working through the account. And that's why 12 years later, we don't have any conversations about, are you doing the right thing by us? Just relationships?
Yep.
Okay. So this, actually, I was talking to Ben earlier. I put down, this is my number one sticky issue. It makes you sticky when you've got hundreds, if not thousands, of client relationships, and the vast, vast majority of those are close relationships which give value-add solutions, and the manager at an operational level buys into the recruitment team. TA and contracts and service levels, if you've got complaints coming from the floor, you're in trouble. But if you've got the floor on your side, you can miss all your service levels, and Shalena will talk about that later. So relationships for me are the number one sticky issue, and that's what Ben said. He called it client alignment, culture. For us, this is culture. I know not to take myself into the Middle East and try and tell them what to do. They don't like a big Brit coming in and telling them what to do. They prefer someone like Shalena or Eman, who's Egyptian. So we really try and judge our relationships and pair up. They've got some senior people in the UK, and guess what? They like going to rugby matches. So do I. I'll pair up with them. That's easy. Yeah? So you've got to look at who you line up to. And there's no coincidence that, Shalena moved from Perth to KL to Dubai to sit next to senior people. And we get on site and we try and get the desk outside the senior person's room or the office next door, so that those corridor conversations happen. And that small issue, which during COVID ended up with a conference call with lots of people invited and proved to be our most difficult 2 years because the relationships weren't there or we didn't build on them, never happened before that, because it was sorted. Oh, I'll come and have lunch with you. I know you've got a full diary. Can we have lunch in the canteen together, and I'll find out what's gone wrong and I'll put it right for you. That doesn't get escalated into a conference call and then joined up with 3 other issues which people have had. It's just solved at a local relationship level. So that stickiness and that value add, and when you're giving them competitive advantage, you're really a partner, and they know you're doing the right thing all the time. So you can tell I'm passionate about the relationships. And if you haven't got a relationship plan, I've got to have one for who I talk to. Shalena's got one. Every recruiter all the way through has to have a relationship plan. If you're not planning your relationship management, you're planning to lose the account, is what I say. Eventually, some will underprice you, out-technology you, but the one thing they can never do is out-relationship you. So that's how we stay on.
Listening instead of selling. I'm going to bring this to life with a story. So when we rolled out our master vendor solution into the Middle East for Baker and actually across the Eastern Hemisphere, we had identified Kuwait has a pretty big area for Baker with contingent workers. We identified that Baker had over 100 contingent workers in Kuwait, spread across about a dozen suppliers, all of questionable compliance. So, this is a pretty high risk area for Baker. But the problem was NES didn't have capability in Kuwait, didn't have a presence, didn't have anything in Kuwait. But we knew there was a problem. Our client had a problem here. It was a ticking time bomb. So we said, okay, forget that we don't have a product here. That's not what we're here to do. So we sent 2-3 people into Kuwait. Myself went there out for a couple of weeks, got a lay of the land, got a full sense of what the situation was, did a lot of research, a lot of discovery. And what we had identified was a global supplier, a competitor to NES, that was operational in Kuwait, that had a pretty strong standing in Kuwait. And we worked it out with them, so we had all 100 plus contractors consolidated and transferred to this one supplier in Kuwait. Brought some good cost savings for Baker as well, so Baker was thrilled. Their compliance was back on track, their risk area minimized. That supplier was great, went from 0 to 100 in just a matter of weeks. And it was a win-win. And for NES, we didn't make a dime. And in fact, it cost us money to have those resources out there for a few weeks and working on this project. But then this is where we talk about hyperopic vision, looking long term. 3 years later, NES did have presence and capability established in Kuwait. And what did we do at this time? Those workers that was now well over 100 transferred from that third-party supplier over to NES. We were able to do it cheaper. Obviously, we've got efficiencies with Baker. So for Baker, another win. They get cost savings, again, working with a trusted supplier. For the other supplier, yes, obviously they were sad to lose those contractors, but you got 3 years of revenue that they wouldn't have had otherwise. And this is where we always approach all our solutions. We never go in with a product looking to sell. We always go in there listening. What do you need? What's the problems? Looking ahead and seeing further down the pipe, what's going to be a potential roadblock for them, a potential problem, and trying to solve it that way rather than, I've got this product, therefore you must have a need that this product can sort for you. Yeah, there we go. Hang on. All right. Now is the next principle, which is the ingenious partnership.
This is a slightly different one maybe, but we sort of thought about it and we've been really successful on occasions because we've brought in other parties. And in other industry sectors, actually bidding as a consortium is quite common, often with your competitors, your partners on one account and then competitors on another. We don't tend to do that in RPO so much, but we sort of broke the mold a little bit by working with AMS to start with. We use a mass of their resources when we want to impress the client. So a lot of the stuff which Ben was saying as well about market research and analytics, we drag that all out of AMS, and HR directors love it and off they go and don't do very much with it, but we try and convince them to change some policies maybe. So we've worked with a lot of partners. We're agnostic on technology. We pulled a partner into Kuwait. So we're happy to go to the market and find people who can do it better than us. On the MSP, we don't provide the payroll everywhere. We provide it in a lot of places, but we'll go to the cheapest. We'll make sure the client gets the right deal with any partner we can find. So we call it ingenious partnerships here. And we continue to think, who's doing something great in the market? How do we get that to our client, even if we don't make any money on it?
And the last principle that we identified as, the secret of our success is really the details. And this is where we've all done it, right? You go into a QBR, you're feeling pretty confident, it's bright green, pass all the SLAs, and you're like, yeah, this will be a slam dunk. And the client tears you completely to pieces. Because what's happened is all the little niggly issues that happen with the local stakeholders happen in one site that seemed like a small matter at the time, but actually it was a pretty high value site, suddenly turns the narrative and you're coming out of that QBR going, what just happened? You've lost sight of what was driving the client, and your contract owner is having to defend your position to their stakeholders. So this is where what we call, making sure that we've got no green hell situations, right? Making sure that we're aware of what the perception is over the data as well. And the reverse is also true. You've got such a thing called red delight. We've had situations where maybe we didn't hit all our SLAs. Maybe in certain areas we were told to slow down a little bit. And that's fine as long as we're flexing with what the client needs as well. But it's taking ownership of what those local issues are, those local stories, and owning them and making sure that we come into those sessions, those engagement with our client, being well aware of what their problems are and taking ownership of saying, right, we know we got a problem here, this is the solution that we put for it. We love challenges on the account. We won't have grown to be where we were if Baker was an easy client, if it was smooth sailing all the way. Our growth has really been a story of overcoming adversity for our client and with our client. And a lot of this has been in terms of creating stories out of these challenging situations. And we've had situations where the SLAs and the contract says do all these things, but the client is now saying, actually, we need you to slow down. This happened during COVID. It was fine to go into a QBR and have it all read because the client's saying you need to slow down. That's all right. In fact, in certain cases, they may say, there's a strategic partner we need you to work with. So for these positions, can you please make sure that you're working with them to leverage their databases? We do need to make a few strategic hires. Our agency hires might go up a little bit. And it's important to be flexible in your contract. I mean, I would say, as long as there's no commercial implication, Mike will go even further and say, even if there is commercial implications, think long term about what we're doing with our data, what we're doing with the stories that occur, and how we're using that to further cement our situation. Anything you want to add to data? It gets us excited, doesn't it? I see how hungry this team is when it comes to data. So we've told you about our 4 principles of the secrets of our success, and using the evolution of RPO to really bring to life what we've been doing with our clients. So how have we been applying these secrets? Bring it all together.
Try to sum it up. As you've heard, it's a story of dedicated, talented local teams, all of them diverse, right from the start. It's not a new thing for us. We've had to pick a path between central dictated Houston policy and procedure and rolling that out locally without us being seen as the bad guy if we're rolling out a policy because HR have backed away and their comms was poor. Responding quickly and listening, not selling. Always deliver whatever the immediate cost and ensure that the client's perception is that you've delivered. Just because you think you've delivered doesn't mean you have in their perception, and what might be being said behind those closed doors is so key. Don't abuse your position of power. We sign long-term, no termination for convenience, exclusive contracts. So they are locked in. And when they want to change or they've done something, and we could sit on our high horse and say, sorry, no, contract's the contract. The moment that comes back out the drawer and you start talking about the contract is the moment someone in that client wants to ditch that contract with you. I just take it. Sometimes they make strange decisions and you just move on. Pride is a horrible thing in these situations. You've just got to let it go. Vigilance of the perception I've put here. You're only as good as your last quarter in your worst region. Yeah. So manage those relationships so tightly that we do not want those little issues escalating. Don't make TA defend you centrally. Ops don't actually care about the service levels, by the way. Ops just care that you get them the people, and if it takes 5 days longer, they don't know what the service level is. They just want you to do a great job and get them great people. And if they know it's a tough role, it'll take a bit longer. They just want it delivered. That was us. Sorry. Have we got any time for questions, Limies?
Yes, you do. And if you have a question, just let me know because we're going to use the mic. As people think of questions, if you have any, I have one for you. So earlier we heard from Ben that in some cases there's misalignment between the client and the RPO, and specifically in terms of business alignment of business strategy. Do you feel that you are aligned with your client, and how do you ensure that you are?
Well, I spoke to Ben, and that's what I mean by relationships. That's being aligned. That's giving them competitive advantage, not just giving them bodies. So I think we are. That one we're safe on, and is part of the reason why it's 12 and 13 years and going strong, and just about to re-sign, hopefully. So, yeah, I think we're okay on that. We're certainly missing some of the others, so don't ask me about those, but that one I think we're okay on. Would you agree, Shalena?
I would. And the interesting thing about Baker, and I'm sure a lot of your clients are like this, so, within the household, it may seem like the one company, but Baker has changed so much in my 12 years with them, right? When I first started, it was Baker Hughes Incorporated. It was very much oilfield services, drill, baby, drill type company, right? And then over time, it became Baker Hughes GE, and then it separated and became Baker Hughes. So the organization itself is not the same, and we saw that internally. And the first few months, you're fighting against it. You're like, oh, the legacy Baker, or oh, the legacy GE. And when you're using vernacular like that, you're fighting against where they're headed. And very quickly we realize, no, it's if you think of your client as the river and you're the boat on it, you need to follow the course of the river. You're just gonna wash ashore, really. Did I answer your question, Lamise?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Patty, sorry, let me pass the mic so we can. Will be mic on there?
Props to you. Congrats on keeping such a client, satisfied and happy. I know that's a lot of work. My question for you is, you mentioned technology, right? And so you don't put technology in just to put it in, but how do you see the technology usage in the various regions where you're supporting recruiting?
Well, they have a global standard, so we're not regionalized with the technology. There is some little bits of regional stuff going on. So we're using Phenom People actually globally for early engagement. So this is definitely moving us towards 4. So responding to the increasing time to hire for some of those software engineering and many of the roles they're looking to hire, we were blowing out. We were 10, 15 weeks. So actually we now ask upfront every quarter, what are going to be your roles you're looking to hire? What are we, 10 per region?
Yeah.
Yeah, 10 roles per region. And we'll pre-recruit. So it's just in time. We've always got to have 10 candidates who would like to apply right now for that job. And so we are applying most of the tech globally. A few job boards, obviously, we're regionalized. We run 15, 20 job boards, which are, some of them are regionalized, some of them aren't. So yeah, we've always got a spin on it, but mainly it's across the board. We're on one standard platform.
And the technology maturity in terms of the adopters does differ. And this is always my concern, especially now being here. I can see how much decision making is done from the US that impacts the rest of the world without the rest of the world having a say in it. And technology is no different. So they came up with, people, as Mike said, which is our CRM, and said recruiters are going to use it for all of these weird and wonderful things without necessarily understanding how the candidate market is going to be interacting with the tools. So what we're seeing is the expectation might be, all right, this is going to take 6 weeks to deploy. 2 years later, I would still have team members that have never logged on to the system. I'm like, how are you doing your recruiting? Like, well, there's no one that I can find with the tool. And actually what turned out was that the tool was not set up to allow search capability within India. It couldn't pick up the different towns and how the naming conventions and all that was. So when it comes to technology, that global perspective is so important. And that's a big part of why we join RPOA, is to try and get that cycle of perspective being brought in, so that when things come up from this part of the world to the rest of the world, that they are factoring what's going to work and not work.
Thanks.
Very good.
Thank you.
Wasn't that